Okay. Good afternoon, students. Are you hearing my voice? Right. So, in the last class, we completed uh, certain things regarding the women reformers as a part of the paper 5, women's women studies as a part of women studies. And today we are going to start the things are such a constitutional developments which taken place in between Government Act of 1990 to the Government of India Act 1930 as a part of the paper 4 Constitutional History of India. In the Constitutional History of India, we completed the various things regarding up to the Act of 1990 as Mounting James Bond Act. We discussed certain provisions about the 1919 Act. Basically, uh, which the Constitution, the Act of the Government Act of 1919, which contained provision for a appointment of commission at the expiration of 10 years for um, uh, passing the act, and uh, it was desirable to establish the principle of responsible government to extend, modify, or restrict the degree of responsible government existing. And uh, the act, which is in short, it merely marked a transitional stage in the development of self-government. It was on the basis of the Montague's report that Government of India was drafted and introduced in the British Parliament, and it became an act in December 1990. Okay, so and we had certain things which regarding this act, and where the certain changes taken place in the central government. The chief executive authority remained vested in the who remain governor general who remained responsible to the British government through the secretary of the state, and not the Indian legislature. Okay, so the Constitution of Governor General's Executive Council was slightly modified, while substantial changes were made in the composition of Indian legislature. Okay, so and the Act provided for a bicameral legislature at the center, the two houses for the Council of the State and Legislative Assembly, and which each legislature consists of certain members. Okay, so and the powers and functions of legislature continued more or less as before, and where um and in the same act, certain changes are taken place in the provincial government. Under the act, the responsibility of certain functions of the government in the provinces was transferred, while control over others was reserved in the British hands. Under this division of the subjects were divided into two halves called the reserved and the transport. Okay. So, the government and the members of executive council were appointed by the British government, who were jointly responsible to the governor general and the secretary of the state for India. And the government of India act the government of India act was applied originally to the eight provinces: Madras, Bombay, Bengal, United Province, Punjab, Bihar, Orissa, and central provinces, and Assam. And in 1923, its provisions were extended to Burma and sometimes later to north western provinces, frontier provinces also. And when you see the general review of the Act for 1919, the Act of 1919 had three major defects from the nationalist point of view, namely options of partial responsible government at the center and the consolidation of the separately electorate. Although the Montfort, this report had declared that the separate electorate was a very serious hindrance to the development of the self governing principles. Yet, separate electorates came to be a permanent feature of Indian political life, and the introduction of diarchy in the province was too comprised to the smoothly work. And nevertheless, something can be said in favor of the act. The act undoubtedly made a new departure, and the diarchy, though the diarchy has been condemned out of the hands, it would be wrong to say that the diarchy brought no constitutional progress. Diarchy was probably the best transitional mechanism that appeared after the prolonged examination of alternatives. Okay, so and many such provisions has provided according to the Act of 1919. Okay, so after that, there are certain constitutional developments has taken place between 1919, Government's Act of 1919, to the Government of India Act 1935. So, in between such a constitutional developments has taken place, a Madhuman Committee, which is appointed in 1924, and Simon Commission has appointed, and to discuss about the recommendation of Simon Commission, three roundtable conferences conducted 1930, 31, 32, in the years of 1931, 32, 30, 30, 31, 32. Okay, so likewise, such a constitutional reforms has taken place. Such developments has taken place. Okay, so we'll see such constitutional developments from the Madhuman Committee. Okay, so before that, I will share my screen and then I will explain. Okay, so first of all, I will start with Madhuman Committee, and then I will explain about Simon Commission and other things. Okay, so Madhuman Committee, which is was appointed by Government of India in 1920 to inquire about diarchy instituted by the mounting Chelmsford reforms, and it had Sir Alexander Madhuman as a chairman, who served as then home member of the Government of India, and other members of the committee were Sir Vijay Chandra Mahtab Bahadur, Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru, Sir P.S. Sivaswamy Iyer, and Sir Henry Smith, and Dr. P. Paranjapai, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Okay, so these were the seven, which is uh, eight members committee, where you find uh, the committee presented its report in December 1924, and in the report, the majority of the members suggested only minor changes in the structure of the constitution. And on the other hand, the minority, consisting entirely of non-official Indians, condemned the diarchy and advocated for its immediate abolition. Okay, so the members also laid down the democratization of the constitution. Okay, so many of them condemned the diarchy, which started, which was a main provision in the 1919 Act, into mounting change for reforms, and which should be abolished. Many members which laid down the democratization of the constitution with abolition of this diet. Okay, so after Madhuman Committee, another important commission which appointed in 1927 was Simon Commission. Okay. So in November 1927, the British government appointed the Indian Statutory Commission, known popularly after the name of chairman as Simon Commission. Its main objective was to go in the further constitutional reforms. All the members of the commission were Englishmen. This was resented by all the Indians. In fact, Simon Commission united at least temporarily different groups and parties in the country. Okay, so the Montague Chelmsford reforms 1919 had envisaged the appointment of a commission 10 years after the inauguration of the reforms to look into the working of the reform scheme. So, but the Swaraj the members of the Swaraj party, uh, but the Swaraj is successfully impressed on the government for the need of an early revision of the Act of 1990. It also demanded a roundtable conference of the representatives, including the Indians, to make necessary recommendations about the new constitution. In the view of the pressure from the Swarajis, the government decided to appoint a commission 2 years ahead of the stipulated period. And the commission, under the chairmanship of Mr. Simon, a eminent lawyer of England, was to have 7 members. All these members were to be Englishmen, and no Indian was included in the commission. This was greatly resented by the Congress and demanded equal representation in the commission. However, the Secretary of the State for India turned down the demand of the Congress on the plea that the report of the commission was to be represented before the British Parliament. The number of Indian political parties being very large, the representation on the commission would make it unwieldy body. In view of the conflicting interests of the Indian political parties, it would not be fair to give representation to some parties and deny the same to the others. Okay, so the exclusion of the Indians from the commission was greatly resented by the Indian National Congress. At its annual session, held in December 1927, Dr. Ansari, in his presidential address, observed, "No sane or self-respecting Indian can ever admit the claim of Great Britain to be the sole judge of the measure and time of Indians' political advance." Okay, so and the other political groups did not approve of the appointment of an all-white commission and condemned the action of the British government. Okay, so when you see, the all parties were to boycott the commission whenever the commission will take a tour in the territories of India. Okay, so we'll see what are the things happened, whether when the commission is toured in India. So, despite the clear opposition of the various political groups and the threat that they would not cooperate with the commission, in fact, finding business, the government announced that Simon's Commission would visit in India. This was a clear challenge to the people, and they acted as one man. As soon as the members of the commission landed at Bombay, a complete hartal was observed. Wherever the commission went, it was greeted with black flag slogans of Simon Go Back. In retaliation of this policy of boycott, the government resorted to policy of repression. It was a result of this policy of repression that demonstrators led by Lala Lajpat Rai at Lahore was mercilessly beaten by the police. In this lathi charge, even Lala Lajpat Rai received serious lathi blows, which proved fatal. Okay, so in UP, in United Province, leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Govind Vallabh Pant were beaten. Okay, so even in many places like in Madras or Madras province, in Bombay, in Uttar Pradesh and the central provinces. Okay, so in everywhere the Simon Commission proved uh, visited uh, there, which was boycotted by every party in India, okay, except one or two. Okay, so then the Simon Commission, which even though the Simon Commission visited India and returned to England and submitted its commission, and we'll see what are the such recommendations which provided in the Simon Commission. Okay, so the despite the clear opposition of various political groups and that and the threat that they would not cooperate with the Simon Commission. Okay, so it also provided certain recommendations also, and despite the general boycott by most of the political parties, the commission met important people who are not boycotting the commission, especially representative of the Muslims and depressed classes. And ultimately, it submitted a report about the constitutional reforms on 7th June 1930. The main recommendations of the commission, as it recommended the abolition of the diarchy as a form of government in the provinces and favored grant of full autonomy, including the Department of Law and Order. Okay, so it recommended the enlargement of provincial legislative councils. Some of the important provinces were to have legislative council consist of 200 to 250 members, and it recommended the constitution of provincial fund to ensure adequate resources for the province without any way infringing of their autonomy. With regard to central government, the commission did not suggest any substantial changes, and it recommended that the central legislature should be reconstituted. The commission considered the unitary form of government as a unsuitable for the India and proposed the establishment of an Indian federation. And the commander in chief should not be a member of the Viceroy, the executive council, and should not sit in the central legislature. High court should be placed under the administrative control of the government of India, and it suggested the separation of Burma from India and Sindh from Bombay. Okay, so the commission did not favor the idea of abolishing the Indian Council, although it favored the reduction in its membership as well as the function. And likewise, such recommendations as suggested by the Simon Commission. Okay. So finally, no doubt that these recommendations of commission were defective, and the commission recommended the abolition of hierarchy, its replacement of provincial autonomy, but it favored grant of overriding powers to the governors, which would be rendered its smooth and successful working doubtful. The Commission also failed to accept the demand of the Indians to grant responsible government at the center or transfer the defense of India in their hands. The recommendation of indirect method of election to the central legislature and the central legislature and um, and this and most of the recommendation of the commission were in no way inferior to the provisions of the government of India Act 1935, which was implemented with the consent of the Indian leaders. Okay, so likewise, such recommendations which suggested by this Simon Commission. Okay, so even though after that, after Simon Commission, one more report you will see as a constitutional recommendations which against the Simon Commission as a challenge uh, from this British government. Indians itself prepared a report, report similar to the Simon Commission. Okay. So where is that report is nothing but the Nehru report. All important Indian leaders and parties dedicated to meet British challenge by drawing up an agreed constitution for India. So an all-party conference held at Delhi and at Pune appointed a subcommittee headed by Motilal Nehru. The subcommittee submitted its report known as Nehru Report in August 1928. Okay. So while announcing the appointment of Simon Commission, Lord Birkenhood, the Secretary of State for India, had challenged that Indians could not produce a constitution acceptable to all the parties. Okay, so he threw his challenge because he was aware of the mutual bickering amongst the Indian leaders belonging to different parties. So the Indian National Congress decided to accept this challenge. In December 1926, the Indian National Congress directed its working committee to convene an all India all party conference for the purpose of drawing up a constitution for India. According to Dr. Rajendra Prasad, this move of the Congress was inspired by not only their desire to meet the British challenge, but also by their keenness to place their ideas and demands before the Indians through the constitution framed in consultation with other political leaders. Okay, so the first meeting of all party conference was held at Delhi on 12th February 1928, in which representatives of 29 parties and organizations took part. Soon, differences cropped among the groups and the meeting was adjourned. The conference again met at Bombay on 19th May 1928, but soon it was discovered that differences were inconceivable, and despite these differences, uh, the conference decided to appoint a small committee under the chairmanship of Motilal Nehru to determine the principles of the new constitution for India and draft a report thereon. Okay, so the committee had 28 members on its panel, which included persons like Subhash Chandra Bose, Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru, Sir Imam Ali, M.R. Sane, M.R. Jekar, G.R. Pradhan, Sahib Qureshi, Sardar Mangal Singh, N.M. Joshi, Jawaharlal Nehru, etc. And this panel represented the Muslims uh, and Hindus and non-Brahmins, Sikhs, labor, etc. The committee submitted its report in August 1920. Such recommendations, which report was submitted, and India should have the same constitutional status in the British Empire as the Dominion of Canada or Commonwealth of Australia. This Dominion status should be the next immediate step, and not state in the evolution. And it also recommended a federal polity for India, in which the Indian states were welcome to fit. The states were to occupy the same position in the new Commonwealth of India as they occupied in the Indian Empire. And it also recommended a bicameral parliament consists of Senate and House of Representatives. The Senate was to consist 200 members elected by the provisional councils. It have tenure of 7 years. The House of Representatives was to consist of 500 members elected on the basis of adult franchise. And it also suggested that the central executive of Commonwealth should consist of Governor General, the Prime Minister, and six other ministers. The Governor General was to be appointed by the British government, but to be paid out of Indian revenues. And the same report which recommended the Governor General in Council should appoint a committee on defense consisting the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Commander in Chief, and the commanders of air and naval forces, the Chief of the General Staff, and two experts. And which also recommended at the time of establishment of Commonwealth, all officers should become officers of the Commonwealth, and the Governor General should have right to appoint a public service commission. And it also recommended a Supreme Court consist of Lord, President, and other justices. And at the provincial level, committee recommended legislative council to be elected on the basis of adult branches, and the executive authority at the provincial level should rest in governor and his executive council. And the Nehru report recommended 19 fundamental rights, which were to be embodied in the state statute. Some of the incorporate rights recommended by the report included right to liberty, right to religion, right to free elementary education, right to equality, right to form associations likewise. And the report also recommended the discarding of communal and separate electorates. Likewise, certain recommendations as suggested by the Nehru report. Okay, so even though the Nehru report was discussed by all parties conference, which met at Lucknow from 28 to 30 August 1928, and was accepted with 8 minor amendments, the majority of the members declared that they should for dominion self-government, but certain members like Subhash Chandra Bose, Jawaharlal Nehru, etc., did not vote for the report because they did not want to commit themselves to the goal of dominion self-government and stood for complete independence. Okay, so this stand of Subhash Chandra Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru was also endorsed by All India Congress Committee at its meeting on 4th to 5th November 1928, which asserted that there would not be any true freedom till the British connection was cut off. Okay, so at the annual session of the Congress at Calcutta in December 1928, a resolution was adopted accepting the recommendations of Nehru report on the condition that a report should be accepted in its entirety by British Parliament on or before 31st December, um, uh, 31st December 1929. Okay, so it was made clear that if the report was not accepted before 31st December 1929, the Congress should not be bound by it, and it would be organized non-violent and non-cooperation against the government. Okay, so where the report was too progressive to be accepted by the government, the report was admitted an act of great constructive statesmanship. The Nehru report may be described as the blueprint of our present constitution, which is probably the greatest compliment that can be paid to it. and it was first attempt made by the Indians in recent times to devise a constitution for themselves. Whether we took to the provision concerning minorities, fundamental right, or defense everywhere, we find abundance of miniature the judgment. From Nehru report, it appeared that Indian leaders were quite clear in their mind, even in 1928, as to what type of constitution they wanted for free India. Okay, so after this submission of Simon Commission, uh, to discuss about the provisions which find at Simon Commission, which submitted by Simon Commission. The government has, British government has initiated to conduct certain roundtable conferences at Britain. Okay, so the main objective of convening the roundtable conference was to involve the Indians in constitutional system, and there were three roundtable conferences which conducted, and the British government, on the basis of the discussion at the three conferences, adopted its proposal for the reform of Indian constitution, which were embodied in the white paper published in March 1933. So we'll see the things which happened taking place at first roundtable conference. The report of Simon Commission was published on 27th May 1930. It was rejected by all parties in India. The British government had no option but to convene roundtable conference and thereby admit the right of Indians to participate in constitutional making. So the Roundtable Conference was inaugurated on 12th November 1930 by the King, was presided by over by Ramsay MacDonald. It was started at time when the civil disobedience movement was at its height in India, and from the repression was being perpetuated by the British bureaucracy in India. The conference had big delegates from India, out of which 57 representatives, British representative from British India, and 16 were from the all Indian states. Okay, so there were 16 members of the British Parliament from all three parties, and the representatives from British India were nominated by the Viceroy, and 16 provinces were also selected by him. And the delegates from the British India represented the Hindus, Muslims, and Christians, Sikhs, and landlords, commercial interests, scheduled caste, trade unions, etc. And there was no representative of the Congress. Okay, so in the opening session of the Congress, the Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald suggested some constitutional proposals on the basis of which discussion was to be the proceedings in the conference. Firstly, a federation form of government was proposed for India. Secondly, provinces were to be given full responsible government with necessary safeguards. Thirdly, partial responsibility was to be introduced in the central government. Okay, subject again to certain reservations. Okay, so even though there was, however, no agreement between the Indian delegates over the communal question, and the Muslims as a body stood for separate electorates. Mr. M.A. Jinnah continued to press for his 14 points, which were presented as the minimum demand of the Muslims. Dr. Ambedkar, on behalf of the scheduled caste, also insisted on separate electorates. So the delegates of Hindus were clearly in favor of giant electorates, but were prepared to concede reservation of seats for the minorities. Thus, the delegates from the British India presented an interesting spectacle, and the representatives of every community viewed with one another in pressing for advantage to their own community. Okay, so the conference concluded in July 1931. In winding up the discussion of the conference, the Prime Minister summed up the conclusion which were arrived at, and which there was a general measure of agreement between the delegates. Okay, so the points agreed upon were the same he had hinted at the opening session, namely an all India conference, fully responsible government in provinces with necessary safeguards and hierarchy at the center with the reservations. Okay, so such conclusions has which expressed by Ramsay MacDonald in the first roundtable conference. Okay. So, in the absence of representative of the Congress, there was a fear that the conclusions reached the conference might not be accepted by the Indian masses. The conference was adjourned to some future date. Okay. So, in the meanwhile, the Gandhi Irwin Pact has taken place where they where which has taken place on where in 1931 March 5th 1931, and where the British government was keen to arrive at settlement with the Congress. In pursuance of the policy, the ban on the Congress Working Committee was lifted, and its members, along with many other important leaders, including Mahatma Gandhi, were released unconditionally on January 26, 1931. And long and long negotiations started between Lord Irwin and Mahatma Gandhi on 17th February, which resulted in the ill-fated Gandhi-Irwin Pact, which was signed on March 5th, 1931. Okay. So, Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru, Mr. Jacob, and Honorable VSS Shastri acted as intermediaries. And this pact, which was ratified on 31st March 1931 by the Karachi Congress, showed a spirit of give and take. On behalf of the government, it was agreed to withdraw all ordinances and pending prosecutions, to set all political prisoners free, except those who are guilty of violence, to restore all property confiscated for taking part in the satyagraha, to permit peaceful picketing of liquor, opium, and foreign cloth shops, and to permit all collection of manufacture of salt free of duty to persons residing within the specific distance and seashore. On behalf of the Congress, on other hand, it was agreed that Mahatma Gandhi will not press for the investigation and to suspend civil discipline movement, to participate in the second roundtable conference on the basis of responsibility and safeguards in the interests of India. Okay, and the final one is to stop all boycott. Okay, so and where the next session of the Congress, which was held in March 1931 at Karachi, where the pact was to come for ratification before the Congress, and Sardar Bhagat Singh and his comrades were hanged on the eve of Karachi session, which all rejoining the connection with it. Rather, the young men were hopefully angry with Mahatma Gandhi. Okay. So, and on his way to Karachi, the youth shouted down with Gandhi. Gandhi's troops has sent Bhagat Singh to the gallows. Okay. So, and these are such things has taken place in 1931. And Lord Wellington, who assumed charge as a viceroy towards the end of April 1934, as a Iron Man, and was a person to appreciate the spirit of the Gandhi Irwin Pact. The terms of the pact began to be violated by bureaucracy, and the Congress once again began to show signs of receptness and resentment. Okay, when you see the second roundtable conference, the second roundtable conference opened on 7th September 1931. Between Gandhi Irwin Pact and Roundtable Conference, significant changes had taken place. Lord Wellington had succeeded Lord Irwin. In England, Labour Party government was replaced by the national government, although Mr. MacDonald continued to be its head, and the Labour Party expelled Mr. MacDonald from forming the national government and assumed the role of opposition. Mr. MacDonald, thus, for all interests and purposes, became the head of the conservative government, and Mr. Woodben, the Secretary of the State for India, was replaced by Sir Samuel Hope, again a conservative. So, as a result of general elections which followed, the conservative government was formed in England in November 1931, while the second roundtable conference was still in session. Thus, when the second roundtable conference met, all goodwill on the side of the British statesmen have disappeared. They again decided to hold India as ever, to regain a few rights surrendered by the government in Gandhi Pact, and relied once again on the too familiar and handy weapon of divide and rule. Okay. So, and this was the background in which second roundtable conference met and carried on its deliberations. Gandhi attended as the sole representative of the Congress. Pandit Madan Mohan Malia and Mrs. Sarojini Naidu were nominated by the government in their individual capacity. A few delegates were added. The Conservative government and Sir Samuel Hore as Secretary of the State for India were the new factors to be reckoned with, to which the to which we have already referred, and MacDonald remained the chairman of Roundtable Conference. Okay, so, and where in the there are certain recommendations has taken place at the second roundtable conference, and in this opening speech at the conference, Mahatma Gandhi delivered an inspired oration in which he sought to convince his audience about the national character of the Congress and about the justice of the India's demand to be mistress in her own houses, while moving a vote of thanks to the chair at the end of the conference. Mahatma Gandhi frankly said that he and the Prime Minister probably come to the parting of ways. Okay. So after that, the third roundtable conference has taken place. The whole idea of subject people sitting at a roundtable conference was which is dis, um, dissatisfaction to the mind of Sir Samuel Gore, and hence it was with the great reluctance that the third roundtable conference was convened, and it was held from November 17th to December 24, 1932. Only 42 delegates were invited. The conservative government took good care not to extend invitations to those from whom there was even a chance of opposition. Only the friends of the conservatives, that is, communalists and liberals, were invited. The Labour Party did not cooperate with it. The participation of the Congress was out of question, and it was engaged in a life and death struggle in the forces of British imperialism, and was being by the government to severest form of repression. Okay, so where the Indian delegates sought to be introduce some progressive provisions, which were all put in cold storage. The question of including a Bill of Right for citizen in the new constitution was raised by the Indian delegates, which was also shelved or flimsy excuses. The conservative government had apparently decided to hold India tightly and to ride rough shed over the aspiration of Indians, including the liberals. Okay, so when you see in 1933, the conservative government issued a white paper which cheaply consisted of conclusions arrived at by the three roundtable conferences, unmindful of the opposition of the Indians. the British government appointed giant selection committee to examine the white paper proposal and report on them. The committee submitted a report on 22nd November 1934, which formed the basis of the government of Act of India 1935. Okay, we'll see about what is the white paper. And the British government, on the basis of the discussions at the three conferences, drafted its proposal for the reform of the Indian Constitution. And these proposals were embedded in the white paper published in March 1933. So the white paper was examined and approved by joint committee of British Parliament, um, and a bill based on the report of this committee was introduced and passed in the British Parliament as Government of Act of 1935. So the white paper in March 1933, the British government published the white paper containing the proposal of British government, indicating the line on which the new Constitution of India was to take shape, and it was drafted on the basis of the discussions held and conclusions arrived at the during the three roundtable conferences. And the white paper contained some points of departure from what was decided at the conferences. But all these innovations were introduced to make it more palatable to the conservative majorities, which were found in both houses of British Parliament. In April 1933, a joint parliamentary selection committee was appointed to discuss in details the proposals of the government contained in white paper. It consists of 16 members from the both houses of British Parliament, with a clear majority of the conservative members, with Lord Linlithgow as its chairman. Okay, so the representatives from British India and the Indian states were invited to appear before it as expert witness. Sir Samuel Hore acted as chief spokesman of the government in his capacity as the Secretary of the State for India. Okay, so the report of the committee was published on 11th November 1934. As we expected, the committee made the white paper still worse from the Indian point of view, uh, uh, and introduced some more reactionary provisions. The white paper had recommended direct elections to the popular House of Central Legislature, and the Giant Select Committee discarded all democratic principles and usages and recommended indirect elections for that house. Okay, so the scope of separate electorates was extended. So the representative of the states were to be nominated by the princes. The power to abolish the second chambers in the provinces had been given to the central legislatives of India by the white paper, and the committee kept this power back in the hands of British Parliament. Okay, so restrictions on the powers of federal court was increased, so as not to make it final court of appeal in India on any point and to leave the supremacy of Privy Council. In fact, in all cases, a bill was drafted on the basis of the report of the committee and became the Government of India Act 1935 after receiving royal assent in August 1935. Okay, so dear students, these are such constitutional amendments which taken place in between Mounting Chelmsford Act of 1919 and the Government of India Act 1935. Okay, so this is about my class today, and tomorrow we'll see the provisions and the importance of Government Act of India, Government of India Act 1935. Okay, students, are you listening? వినిపిస్తుందా శ్రీ విద్య? Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay, right.
Yes.
Regarding my class, you have any clarifications?
ఏం లేదు సార్.
Okay, right. So I'm ending my class now. Thank you.